Okay, I'm going to address something that I think all of us deal with, but I'm not sure. So there's this thing that happens when you're studying Christian Science, and the culture of Christian Science has promoted it. Well, it is in the culture of Christian Science, and I think it's something that we really need to address, and that is feeling ashamed around not doing it right or not feeling like we can acknowledge what the science is telling us. Let me explain. Let me explain. When you read There Is No Matter, There Is No Sensation in Matter, and you come up against the feeling that something's hurting, there's this thing that goes on inside of us where that false sense of ego, mortal mind, is screaming at us, but this feels real. And we intellectually know in science, this isn't real. And there's this, I feel like I'm doing it wrong. There's a level of shame. I don't know if you guys experience this. I've experienced this with people I work with. I've experienced this with myself. So I offer that as a possibility for you as well, that there's this level of, I'm doing it wrong. Why can't I get this? What's wrong with me? And here's what's true. Both can be going on at the same time. Let me give you an example that's not this so that you can kind of hear what I'm saying. And if you didn't have kids, you understand it because it's a universal sort of scenario. When I have a 5-year-old child and I need to go to the toy store and I've got to bring my child with me because I don't have childcare, got to go to the toy store and buy a present for the cousin. Not getting one for my child. The child flips out, goes into the toy store. Of course, a 5-year-old going into a toy store, they want to get, like, I want that and that and that. It's like, no, sorry, we can't get that. And then they flip out and they're, making a mess on the floor and, like, having a tantrum. It's like, can't you understand that it's not always about you? That this isn't for you right now. We're getting this for your cousin. And you, like, grab the kid's hand and you walk out of the store. Well, a couple of things are happening there. Yes, it's true. We're not getting it for you. You have to understand, and you can do it nicely. But here's what's true. The child put into a scenario of a toy store, you put into the scenario of being human for a moment, has feelings about things. Validating those feelings, acknowledging them, having empathy for them, and at the same time holding the boundary is the appropriate thing to do. So there's the boundary. We know that this child ain't getting a toy today. We're getting it for the cousin. Got to hold that line. I mean, in this particular scenario, you can talk about it all different ways. We know that we want to validate their feelings. So the other way of doing it, it's like, I know this is hard. I know it feels really hard to be in a toy store and to not be able to get the toy. So I get it. I get that it's hard. So let's take a picture of the one you really want. My answer is still no for today, but let's take a picture of the one you really want because I empathize with you. I understand this is what you're feeling and this is what you really want right now. I get it. Let's take a picture of it and we'll talk about it another time. But for right now, we're getting the present for your cousin. So you've drawn the boundary clearly. You've validated their feelings and said, I acknowledge you are feeling this, that you really want this, and this feels really important to you in this moment. And I have empathy for that. This must be really hard. I remember when I was a kid and I couldn't get something. So these two things, these two polar opposites are happening at the same time. And we, as people walking around on the planet, in every scenario of life are facing this. And for whatever reason, it seems very difficult to hold the two polar opposites at the same time. But that is where grace comes in. And that is where we know the truth, and the truth sets us free. if we try to deny the truth, and the truth is there are these seeming two opposites going on at the same time. If we keep denying that we're experiencing this thing, we seem to be experiencing this thing, and say, no, 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 I'm going to deny that I'm feeling pain. I'm just going to deny it. Acknowledging that, yeah, this is what's coming up for me. It's not saying it's real. It's saying this is what's coming up. Acknowledge that it's coming up, that mortal mind is trying to present itself as real. It's not saying mortal mind is real. It's not saying that pain and matter is, sensation and matter is real. It's saying that's what seems to be coming up right now. Acknowledging it so that we're not sort of in denial of our own self, and then feeling ashamed that, oh, but I am feeling this. Oh, but I need to feel ashamed because that's not really true. So the way out, kind of the way out of this, let me sort of ground this in the Bible and Mrs. Eddy's writings. Truth, the actual truth, the absolute truth, as opposed to the relative sense of things, which looks like a conflict, the absolute truth is where our security lies. And that's where we get that place of release. If we don't acknowledge that it seems to be a conflict, then we end up feeling shame and feeling like we're wrong and feeling like there's this pressure that I can't get out of. If we acknowledge that it seems to be this way, and we know the answer to that, then the pressure drops away. Then we go, okay, yeah, I acknowledge that this seems to be the case. It's what the senses seem to be trying to tell me, but I also know that's the lie. And if I go with the truth, I know that's going to lead me out of this sense of things so that I no longer have that sense of things, because it's a false sense. It's not the reality of a problem, it's the false sense of a problem. So in the Bible, it talks about where the story of, the building the idols for Diana, the goddess Diana. God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. Well, the place of confusion that feels like there are these two things going on that are opposite and there's no way out of that. And that place of confusion, that, wait, I feel this, but I'm told I'm not supposed to feel this. And that's not the reality. Just tell the truth. Humanly speaking, right? In the relative sense, tell the truth. Yeah, this is coming up for me. This is what it seems to be. And then lean on the absolute truth to walk out of that place of duality into the reality that there is only one truth. There is only one real. There is only one thing going on here. Okay, it seems to be this, but I know what's true. So there is only one God. I mean, that's the bottom line. There's only one God. So if we live after the flesh, we die. If we live in this place of there are two realities, then that's a problem. Dualism, a problem. If we live in the place of, okay, there's a relative sense of what's going on here that looks like a duality, and I know that I'm not living in this place of matter, but I am acknowledging that that is what's coming up. There's a belief of it coming up. I'm not going to just deny that this is coming up for me, humanly speaking. It's coming up. It's like the temptation is always going to be at the door. That doesn't mean we let it in, we buy it as real, and we start jumping on that bandwagon. We recognize it's coming up, and then we stand in authority to deal with it. If we keep denying that it's coming up, we're stuck in no man's land. And we're stuck in shame because, I'm not supposed to think it's coming up because I know this is what's true over here. And that piece of shame goes, that shame, naturally, because of what shame is, wants to be hiding. Because the only way for shame to exist is to hide. So how many of us have hidden when we've had a problem? How many of us have been embarrassed to admit there's an issue here that I'm dealing with? We don't want to admit it because we feel like we're not being a good Christian Scientist. That's the culture. That's not the reality. That's the culture that's imposed on this system. That's not, it's not, I individually, I do not think that that is a healthy thing. I think that has caused a lot more problem than it has been helpful around. So the spiritual fact and the material belief of things, Mrs. Eddy says, are contradictions. She says it. The spiritual fact, hear that, the spiritual fact and the material belief of things are contradictions. So let's acknowledge it. Yeah, there's a contradiction here. And I'm feeling that contradiction. I'm feeling the polar opposites of something, and I'm dealing with that. Okay. Acknowledge it for yourself, that you're feeling the contradiction. That's okay. That's not bad or wrong. It doesn't make you wrong or like you're not doing this right. Yeah. The spiritual fact and the material sense of things are contradictions. And we feel that very actively in our human experience. There's nothing wrong with that. Acknowledge it. I'm feeling this contradiction. Okay, now let's take the next step. The science of mind denies the error of sensation and matter and heals with truth. The science of mind denies the error of sensation and matter and heals with truth. So the fact is, the absolute fact is, looks like there's a contradiction, but the truth is, that's not the real, that's just the sense of things. Am I feeling the sense of things? Yeah, it's coming up for me. I'm going to acknowledge that's coming up for me. How do I get out of that? The truth gets me out of that. The absolute truth gets me out of it. That's why Mrs. Eddy spends so much time talking about declaring the truth, affirming the truth, defending yourself daily, all of these very active sort of demands on us to take a stand. That's why, because it's going to keep coming up. And to deny that it's coming up is to say, I don't exist, essentially. The validation and the empathy for the child gives the child, I'm real, I exist, I am feeling these things. These things are coming up for me. I'm not wrong or bad to be experiencing this to my sense of things. I will learn over time that not getting what I want in that moment, I will survive. I will be okay. And in fact, learning to postpone that kind of immediate sense of the ego wanting, the false ego wanting, is a good thing, is a good quality, is a good discipline of thought and emotion in the human sense of things. That's good to feel that, feel it come up and then know how to handle it. So acknowledge, yep, it's coming up. Oh, and now I have confidence in handling it. Whereas if I deny that it's coming up, I never get to the point of practicing how do I handle it. So it's interesting in the Bible story where Jesus is, there's a great multitude and followed. Jesus withdrew himself with the disciples to the sea, and a great multitude from Galilee followed him, and from beyond Jordan, and from Jerusalem, and from Idumea, and from blah, 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 blah. So he's sitting there, and what does Jesus say? He talked to the disciples and he said, hey guys, have a ship kind of standing by because there's a huge crowd of people here pressing on me and they're going to want, and I don't know how this is going to go. It's like security for, the rock star that's going into the venue to do the concert. Security is around them. It's like the disciples were around and he's saying, okay, have the limo waiting outside the stage door because these people are like really coming at me and I want to be able to get away if I need to. Jesus says, have the boat standing by. He's acknowledging the human scene that's going on, there's a press of people on him who are demanding things of him and expecting things of him. And yes, he's healing a lot of people, but he's acknowledging the human scene. He's saying, have a boat standing by. And he's not afraid, but he's acknowledging the relative. I just thought that was really interesting. That there's no sort of denial that there's a big crowd of people here and I'm one guy. He's acknowledging it. He's not above the human. He's walking on the planet demonstrating this. But what he's doing is he's doing it with the understanding of truth and reality. There's nothing to fear. The reality is I and my Father are one. The reality is healing is available for all present. And there may be a situation where I need to get away from this crowd quickly, and that's okay. So let's be prepared. So you can do the same with the human scene around, feels like there's sensation in matter, feels like I don't feel well right now. Those things can come up. Great. Recognize there is no conflict in God. There is no confusion in God. I know the truth. I know the absolute. And I know that when I lean on that, my sense of this duality is going to lessen and lessen and lessen because that's not real. It's just the sense of things that's coming up right at this point where thought is. And that's okay. There's no shame in that. There's no, you're doing it wrong and you need to stop it. Because that's what the culture has told us, or at least some of us. I don't know. Maybe some of you haven't experienced that. Jesus, Mrs. Eddy says, plunged beneath the material surface of things and found the spiritual cause. So when we are tempted to believe, when the temptation comes up, when it seems like we're dealing with a big problem, we do have the tools that we need to plunge beneath the material sense of things and see what's real. That gives us the confidence in that moment to not feel afraid that there's this duality, there's this confusion, there are these two realities going on. Uh-oh, I can't sit in one and I can't sit in the other. I can't sit in the truth because this feels really real. Well, that conflict happens when we're not acknowledging that it feels real. When we're denying that it seems to feel real. Don't deny it, just go, oh yeah, it does seem to feel real. But now I know the tool that I need to get out of that seemingness into the reality. I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm saying it in different ways. How can I heal the body without beginning with so-called mortal mind, which directly controls the body? So if we're not acknowledging that we need to kind of acknowledge that mortal mind is screaming, saying something, if we're not acknowledging it, we're just denying it. Nope, 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 that's not happening. Acknowledge it. Oh, I need to first deal with mortal mind claiming this is real. I got to first deal with that. I got to contain mortal mind and say, I see you. And the false ego loves that, by the way. The way to placate the false ego is not to say, you don't exist. It's to say, I see you. Thank you for your opinion. Thank you for trying to protect me. Thank you for shoving it in my face yet again. I see you. Now you can go sit in the corner because I know the absolute. I know you're not real. But the way to placate you and to get you to stop screaming at me is to say, I see you. Pause. Like to the child, like, I see you, acknowledge, validate, empathize. I see you. Doesn't mean you're agreeing with. You're just saying, I see you. You're trying to help me. I get it. I know, like, control the strong man. Get them to settle down. You know how to manage the strong man. Settle down. It's okay. You can pause. And now I have the tool that I need, spiritual sense, dive beneath the material surface of things to know the truth, and the truth is what's going to set me free. The truth is what's going to bring the healing to thought. It's already there, but it's going to bring the healing, the awareness of the fact, to take precedence in thought so that my human consciousness equals my human experience and the healing is apparent, comes to the surface. That of which immortal mind takes no cognizance this is part of the definition of matter. That of which mortal mind takes no cognizance. That of which, immortal mind takes no cognizance. Matter. Immortal mind takes no cognizance of matter. Okay, and at the same time, that which mortal mind sees, feels, hears, tastes, and smells only in belief. But notice she says only in belief. Mortal mind believes that it sees, feels, hears, tastes, smells. It believes it wholeheartedly. You can acknowledge, mortal mind, I know you believe that. I know you believe it completely wholeheartedly. And I also know that immortal mind takes no cognizance of that. Those two phrases are right next to each other in the definition of matter. Looks like, how can these two things exist in the same place? Acknowledging that they do gets us out of the problem. Acknowledging, yep, these two things seem to be sitting in the same place. I'm not going to deny it in terms of, I'm denying it in the absolute sense, but I'm not denying myself the fact that this is the way it seems. Because then I'm denying that I'm real. I'm denying that I'm really experiencing this on some level, to my sense of awareness, to my sense of things right now. It's like to deny your very existence. And so there's this conversation around, if I go for the absolute, then I get wiped out. Well, we don't if we acknowledge this. Our sense of it looks like conflict, looks like dualism, looks like, yep, that's the sense of things. And as I work my way out of that, I work my way out of it by acknowledging the truth. Immortal mind has no sense of error. Never has, never will. That's the fact. And that is the reality. But the sense of things that I'm dealing with right now, I'm walking around on the earth seem to be walking around on the earth in a body. I don't know about you guys, but I seem to be. I don't know. The predisposing, remote, and exciting cause of all bad effects is a law of so-called mortal mind, not of matter. And here's where a really important distinction comes in. Mrs. Eddy tells us that it's a law of mortal mind, not a law of matter. So when we understand that matter really is what mortal mind is seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, it's not a thing unto itself. That's why, all of this healing stuff we're talking about, it's all mental. That's why it's not actually fixing matter, because there is no matter. So when we recognize that the predisposing, notice these three things: predisposing, remote, and exciting cause, predisposing cause, remote cause, and exciting cause of all bad effects, is a law of so-called mortal mind, not of matter. That's a get out of jail free card. All bad effects are a result of the so-called law of mortal mind. Acknowledge it. Go, yeah, okay, I see that. So you can acknowledge, great, mortal mind is coming up with this thing again. I acknowledge that that's a mortal mind thing. Contain the strong man. Recognize this is the strong man talking. Don't say, nope, the strong man's not talking. No, it's not talking. That's not real. I'm gonna hide my head in the sand. That's not demonstrating Christian Science. Hiding your head in the sand is not demonstrating. It's acknowledge, okay, strong man, I see you. And I also know that you are a lie of false belief. I know that this is a false belief. I know that mortal mind is tempting me to feel this, but I know it's a false belief. It's not the reality. Mind is the master of the corporeal senses, Mrs. Eddy says, and can conquer sickness, sin, and death. Exercise this God-given authority and take possession of your body and govern its feeling and action. So she gives us that place of, yes, acknowledge there's a strong man, contain the strong man. The so-called law of mortal mind is the one telling you this is all real and painful and whatever. Acknowledge it and now contain it. Take possession of your body, govern its feeling and action. Demonstrate this. You have dominion. So you are the mind is the master of the corporeal senses. So you have the tools you need to get past this seeming conflict. There is no confusion. There's complete clarity when we acknowledge it. It feels like confusion when we put ourselves into the battle of, well, this is true and this is not, and this is, when we say, no, that's not really happening, then it feels like confusion. Truth is made manifest by its effects upon the human mind and body. Truth is made manifest, the healing, by its effect on the human mind and body. Like, let that sink in for a second. We're not talking about truth has its effect on the spiritual body, out lofty in space, not grounded. Truth is made manifest by its effects on the human mind and body, healing sickness and destroying sin. The effect of this science is to stir the human mind to a change of base, on which it may yield to the harmony of the divine mind. That's where we are in this. So acknowledging, yeah, I'm feeling this. That's what's coming up for me right now. And I know what's true, and I know my way out of this. The divine mind is the place of my salvation. So I hope this was clear. Truth and love will establish a healthy state. And that's lowercase truth and love, which is always very comforting. It's like, okay, I can feel truth and love in my little humanness. And I know there are some of you who have a really hard time with the way I use pronouns. Just flow with me from the absolute to the relative and don't let it freak out the place in you that wants to be absolute all the time. It's like, yes, I'm acknowledging, here I am sitting in the chair with my little feet on the floor and my hands on my heart. Yeah, and you see me with your human eyes. There's nothing wrong with that, and I'm not ashamed. And at the same time, I know that I am a complete spiritual idea, and that what looks like a material visage is not the reality of my being, that I am spiritual, that there is no matter, that matter is nothing. This illusion, I'm going to look beyond the illusory sense of this, and I'm going to know the truth at the same time. Two things like that can happen at the same time. Get comfortable with that, and you will feel a lot less shame, and you will feel a lot less pressure that you're doing it wrong, or that you're not doing enough, or that you're bad. Like all of that BS, let it all go and just acknowledge, okay, this is where I seem to be right now, and I know where I'm going. And I'm not sitting in that and calling it real. I'm acknowledging that it's coming up and seems to be real. There's a difference. I'm not calling it real, but I am acknowledging it's coming up and seems to be real at the moment to my sense of things. Oh, mortal mind sense of things. Oh yeah, mortal mind is the one that is calling this the law. Divine mind doesn't know anything about that. And I'm going to acknowledge that. And then I'm going to go, okay, immortal mind, divine mind, what do you know? that I know because I'm a reflection of you. There is no confusion in mind. There is no confusion here. There's clarity about the path. And I've gone a little long this morning. Okay, let's bring it in. So I'm going to go a little longer only because I need to bring this out in today's conversation. Mrs. Eddy talks about the verdict. Well, she talks about, brain thinks, stomach can make man cross, injury can cripple, and matter can kill man. This verdict of the so-called material senses victimizes mortals. Anybody feel that? Yeah, we feel that. This verdict of the so-called material senses victimizes mortals, taught as they are by physiology and pathology to reverse false testimony, even the errors that are destroyed by truth through spiritual sense and science. Recognize that it's the verdict of the material senses, that so-called verdict, that what the verdict of the material senses is the thing that's victimizing mortals. It's not victimizing you. It's victimizing the mortal sense of man. So you are not a victim of this, what seems to be a conflict. And that's a really important thing to get in this. Yes, we're acknowledging, feels like victimhood because mortal mind, the material senses are calling it real. But when we acknowledge that that's mortal mind's game, we contain the strong man. If we keep kind of denying that that's mortal mind's game, then we don't have the ability to contain the strong man and keep ourselves from feeling victimized, because that's the mortal sense of things. Okay, so that's a really important point. And I'll finish the other line. Truth and love will establish a healthy state, guide and govern mortal mind, or the thought of the patient. Truth and love establish a healthy state and guide and govern mortal mind. So know that truth and love are guiding and governing thought to the reality of freedom, to the reality of health and wholeness, to the reality of your true nature that is not stuck in the material sense of things, which is just a false sense of truth, life, and love. A false and temporal sense, mortal mind, a false and temporal sense of truth, life, and love. So it's just the sense of things, not the reality. But we are going to acknowledge that sense of things. We're not going to deny that that's happening. Acknowledge it. Then you can get out of it. Then you can see it for what it is. If you don't acknowledge it, you're not exposing it. It's not 2/3 destroyed. Expose it. Acknowledge it, expose it. Yeah, that's coming up loud and clear. Not you are coming up, mortal mind, but you're not real. And we're all good. Okay. A lot. This was a lot. It like came through loud and clear. I'm assuming, because God never fails, I'm assuming that this was a need. I always love the way things come through. So boundaries clear boundaries, clear acknowledgement of what is true. And that piece of sort of empathy and validation, acknowledging this is where I am. I know the truth, but this is where I seem to be right now. And that's okay. You're not bad or wrong. There's no shame. The false ego would like us to feel shame and let it hide. We're not going to feel ashamed. We're going to rip that mask right off. We're going to contain the strong man, rip the mask off and say, I see you. No shame. Okay. Email me if you have a question, because this is a lot. And so just let me know. You always feel free to reach out, you guys, because I'm here. All right. And I love you. And you're amazing. And I just adore you. I really do. So have a wonderful day. Oh, and tomorrow, open office at noon. I'll put it in the email today as a reminder, but just put it on your calendar. Tomorrow at noon, open office for all of you, all y'all, for all y'all. All right. Love you. Bye.